Welcome, Michelle and Rebecca. I'm so excited to be hosting you today on this episode of the Revolutionary STEMist. I'm joined here by two of Philadelphia's ecosystem and actually the state of Pennsylvania's ecosystem as well. Two people who really support the state and the bringing in new companies, new business, new startups. And so I'd love for you to start off with you introducing yourselves, your titles, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what your roles are in supporting the Philadelphia ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joanna, for the invitation to have this conversation today. My name is Michelle Cully, and I am the Life Sciences Economic Development Specialist for the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, DCED for short.
My name is Rebecca Grant. I am Senior Director of Life Sciences and Innovation with the Philadelphia Department of Commerce, and my role sits within the Business Development Unit.
Awesome. So, those are pretty impressive titles. So, I would love to learn more about what actually does that mean? What does your day to day look like so that we can really understand the role that you each play in helping to develop the economy here in both Philadelphia and the broader state. So, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and really what does success, how do you define success for yourselves and your roles?
I don't know about impressive titles, but definitely long for myself. So I always like to orient people where I actually work in Governor Josh Shapiro's administration because I think that's helpful in understanding a little bit more about what I do day to day. So DCED is a Commonwealth department, so we cover all 67 counties in Pennsylvania. And there's a number of different groups within DCED because it has a large scope of work, and I sit in the group for technology and entrepreneurship. So the initiatives that I'm helping drive are around promoting innovation as well as growing life sciences businesses with a specific focus on entrepreneurs, founders, startups, and small to mid-size life sciences companies. Usually that means they're pre-commercial, which is a pretty hard place to be as a life sciences company, as we're all familiar with. And success in the short term looks like getting companies to their next step or overcoming a challenge that they're having that they can't quite um, get over themselves. And then in the long term, it looks like for us being able to set up programs and resources that really fit the life sciences industry because we have a lot of agnostic programs, meaning any industry or any business from any industry can apply. But a lot of times, the criteria for being able to receive that support doesn't fit a life sciences business because it's so unique in terms of how much capital you need, how much time from discovery to commercialization. And so in the long term, it would be having a system of resources that are better for the life sciences industry.
My role sits within Philadelphia and within city government. So similar to Michelle, but I work with all size life science or tech companies. Charged with doing is attracting, expanding, and retaining life science companies and tech companies to Philadelphia. Um, we also work on policy and incentives as well. But there's a myriad of things that we weren't necessarily charged with that we do every day. And that is connecting a lot of people to a lot of other people so that we're not working in silos. But the core is attraction, retention, and expansion of companies. Specifically for me, life sciences and tech, we have other sector leaders for creative economy, advanced manufacturing, and retail and finance in our office as well.
That's awesome. Thank you for helping understand or helping to explain that because Michelle, you're right. We hear a lot about early stage companies before commercialization, the challenges that they have because there's a lot of risk at that point. So it's great to know that there's support from the state level and obviously as well from the city too to help support them in that way. And we're going to get a little bit into that a little bit later. But before we do, love to learn a little bit more about each of you and how you approach your roles. Because Rebecca, you're both scientists. And Rebecca, you're a scientist yourself. Your earliest research was in viral gene therapy at Penn. So, how does your background change the way you approach this job that maybe somebody who didn't have a scientific background or a typical economic development background would approach this job?
So I think my approach is different because first I'm a clinician and then I became a researcher. And the big difference is that in my mind, all of these companies are searching for treatments and cures for humans or animals that have things they didn't ask for. So that is my lens in all of this is the patient. Um, Also, I think having done clinical work and scientific work, I can engage scientists and clinicians that are spinning out companies and thinking about coming to Philadelphia about what it's like to do research here as opposed to other ecosystems. Also, I can engage them about their science. I can't engage every type of science, but I can understand on some level what it is they're doing and what they need. And often, these companies are spun out based on some issue that they've had with a family member or themselves. It's usually like, they're really altruistic and trying to find cures and treatments. Um, and so I think that is a huge difference and a different lens that I bring to this work than your typical economic development practitioner.
Yeah, and that makes a huge difference when you can speak the science with people, when you get where they're coming from, and it is for the patient. I know that I experience that too because I'm a clinician at heart as well, and so I really think about things from the patient perspective before anything else. So that's awesome, and I'm sure that they learn a ton from you and they appreciate that as a result. So for you, Michelle, your remit is the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh and all the rural communities in between that might just be thinking about life sciences, or what a cluster like that might mean for them. So, can you tell us a little bit more about what's happening in life sciences beyond Philadelphia or beyond the cities, and how you're thinking about the state as a whole more broadly?
So I'll start with talking about Philadelphia a little bit. I know Rebecca can go into more detail, and we're going to go into more detail throughout this conversation. But it's definitely our richest life sciences innovation ecosystem between all the incredible research at our universities, as well as private and nonprofit institutions, our leading medical centers, and then the variety and volume of the life sciences companies in the city, all colocalized together, make for such a special environment to pursue life sciences here. Over in the Southwest, we have Pittsburgh, which is another leading innovative life sciences ecosystem. What's unique about them is the research that goes on in AI and robotics there. They are world renowned at Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh. And we have already seen like the drastic changes that have gone on in the life science industry because of AI, and there's much more to come. And I believe like sort of the second wave or the next set of steps of that will be the robotics and the automation that will start to become ingrained in the life sciences industry. So really excited for the crossover of all of those fields, because I think it has the potential to achieve so much more. So just want to make sure I highlight Pittsburgh and give it a shout out, because I don't know if we'll return to talking about it. And then when we push out from the cities, Philly and Pittsburgh, and we start to go into central Pennsylvania, we have lots of big pharma. Most of the big farmers have either a research and development site or a manufacturing site. And we also have suppliers, manufacturers of chemicals, raw materials, contract manufacturers, contract research organizations. And those are all really important parts of the supply chain for any life sciences company. So being able to have all of that in Pennsylvania is such an asset. And when we think broadly about the Commonwealth, we're trying to connect the dots more easily for companies because the more they're able to partner and work together, it's going to open doors for everyone. And then just to specifically talk about our rural areas a little bit, all across the country, not just in Pennsylvania, our rural communities top of mind is healthcare. Healthcare is really struggling in these places. And when we think about what innovation is for, it's to improve, it's to support communities, and it's to change the narrative, maybe if you're going in a wrong direction. So these communities can benefit the most from innovation. So, how do we make sure that they're involved with our powerhouses of innovation, but also um, to leverage our resources and empower those communities because they're living these struggles every day and they're entrepreneurs there, but they might just need the infrastructure and resources. So we want to empower them to solve the challenges that they're facing. But it's a big it's a big problem. We have 9 counties in Pennsylvania that don't have a hospital, and 35% of our rural hospitals reported in 2024 of operating at a loss. So things need to change, and I think innovation is the answer.
Those were some really sobering statistics that you just shared, and I'm so glad that you did because I think it's a problem that not everyone is maybe aware of, but those, well, I mean, you can call them hospital deserts, if you will, or and I've seen some innovation actually happening, in different parts of the state, especially in the Lake Erie region, with different ways of supplying care and so forth. But I don't know if people actually recognize the magnitude of that problem, and it's not just here. I mean, if we think about the country as a whole, that's a huge. There's a huge huge space to create innovation and provide to patients. So thank you for highlighting that. I think that's amazing. So you were talking about, like, for some of these smaller companies that are in the rural areas, not and beyond in our area here, one of the biggest things that can hinder or help their progress is the access to capital, resources for capital, and then also connections. And Rebecca, you highlighted how you guys really play a big role in connecting people. So there have been a number of investments, or at least opportunities, recently and over the last several years um, funding mechanisms within the city. And there's a few that I would like to highlight around SBIR, STTR matching grants through the Philadelphia city-led program that maybe Rebecca, you can touch on a little bit more, where the University City Science Center is helping to implement that. There's a PA Innovation Program, the Penn Startup Fund, uh, PXB Fund, the Penn and Biotech and Osage. That I just saw Osage Partners at a recent event, and they were talking about how their funding mechanism and what they're looking for. So there's lots that's happening, which is awesome. But for somebody who's a founder and actually, like, doesn't know about all of this, like, how do they find out, and what does the on ramp for that look like? Like, how do we get them in the door to figure out how to access some of these resources?
Yeah, I can start at the city level. So I think the right thing to do is to call your commerce department, to get in touch with your commerce department, to look at our website. Um, if you email anyone in our department, you'll reach, the final destination of who it is you need to speak with. And the reason I say that is because we're agnostic, right? We're government. We work for taxpayers of PA in Philadelphia, and we will tell you everything available to you. We're not going to try to get you in a specific building or space or into a specific program. We want you to know everything that's available. So I think starting with your local government office, if they don't have an economic development body, most big cities have a commerce department, but you can also speak to the nonprofit economic development folks. But I think you can find someone in government. It's just that agnostic position who's willing to tell you everything available to you.
And I think those are all good points, and I second all of that in terms of people you should reach out to. But another great resource that I think gets overlooked a lot by life sciences founders are the small business development centers. They are usually partnered with a university, and they are federally funded. So they have resources beyond the city, county, state level. And what's important about them is they're really good at helping individuals start to craft their business plan, because there is a lot of thinking that, like, your incredible technology or your product is your whole business, but it's actually a really small part of it. And if you want to be able to compete for grants or get investment, you need to show that you have ironed out your business plan, not that you just have incredible IP. Otherwise, people are going to try to take your IP from you because they're like, you don't have the wherewithal to bring this forward. So I think that's a great place to start because they're all over the Commonwealth. You don't have to be in a big city. And yeah.
So that's an awesome resource I didn't even know about. So thank you for highlighting that in a big way. And I talked a little bit about these SBIR, STTR grants, and it's one of the most powerful federal funding mechanisms because people can really get funding early on. And we all know that in life sciences, like, that early phase, pre-seed, seed, is, like, really critical, but also really hard to get funding because it's such high risk. There isn't a high, probability of success if you're not really thoughtful and careful about how you design experiments and so forth. So it's really hard to get funding in that space. So that's why SBIR and STTR is such a really critical um, avenue for companies to go. And here in the Pennsylvania, we've actually received 226 awards totaling over 134 million in a single year, which is, like, incredible to be able to say that. But tell me a little bit more, like, why do founders actually either not know about this, or if they know about it, they don't end up pursuing it?
Yeah, I think a lot of them think it's not for startups. Um, and the program, it sits at this awkward space between like government, academia, and venture capital. So it often gets overlooked by mainstream startup culture. I think there's also a cultural issue, like venture funding gets the attention and prestige, while non-dilutive federal funding doesn't. So founders may give up equity before realizing they could have access, series R&D serious R&D capital instead. Um, so yeah, I think it's just, and then it can seem intimidating to apply for, but I just think we have to encourage companies and remind them that private VC or angel funding is not the only way. That this is a great product for startups. SBIR STTR funding.
Yeah, and I would have to agree. Before joining the Commonwealth, I actually helped a startup pursue an SBIR grant, and it was like I was on from the very beginning of like, what is an SBIR? Where do you apply? How do you apply? And it is actually, if you've never done it before, if you never applied to any type of federal grant, which we both have experience in academia, and those grants, they ask for a lot. So when I approached the SBIR, it didn't look very different from that. But for individuals who had been receiving funding from pitching at competitions, the idea of, "Oh, we have to make sure our business is registered in all these different places. We have to provide all this documentation. We have to have this business plan. We have to have aims for our research." It's a lot to figure out, and it's a lot of work up front. And even before all of the chaos that happened last year with SBIR funding, it was a lot of time between you starting the grant, submitting it, and receiving any funds. So I think there are founders who believe it's not worth the time in the beginning. They have so many other things to explore and pursue, and it can be a big time sink. The other thing I will say is you have to match basically a solicitation, a call out from a research department at the federal level. They have to say, we want research and on Alzheimer's. And so if your product fits into that solicitation, you applied for it. And so also getting good at positioning your product for these solicitations. Just because outright it's not a perfect match doesn't mean you won't be eligible and you won't receive those funds. Um, there's just a little bit of art to that. And also, different departments want different types of writing. So, I'm going to do a plug for one of the state resources, which is iPart. This is a state funded resource to help individuals prepare for submitting an SBIR STTR grant. And they will kind of help you with the ins and outs that you can't find on a website. But I will say you need to come prepared. You have to have your IP, you have to have maybe some experiments done, and you have to have a business plan because you're gonna need all of that for the SBIR application.
And I actually think it's like the perfect type of funding for like deep tech and hard science type companies that VCs are hesitant to um, provide capital for early on.
Mhm.
So a good resource.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually really helpful. It's like what types of companies are good at, like, are good candidates for this type of funding. So that deep tech piece, and I think anybody who's in the therapeutic space, I feel like would be a great qualifier for that as well. Um, so what you were talking about with the work that's the amount of work that's needed up front. It's interesting because I just had a conversation recently with Irene Rombel from BioCurie, and she got so the time lag that you're talking about and the amount of work that had to go into that ARPA H grant contract that she worked on with the government. She was sharing just, she didn't sleep for 5 weeks. It was a lot of work, but I shared with her, I was like, but that exercise must have gotten you so crystal clear on how you're going to move forward. And to your point, like when you do all of that work up front, then you have a really good plan of action and you're not kind of just moving along and building the plane as you're running it. So I appreciate that, like, comment about that. So, but coming back to the funding piece, and the SBIR, STTR. So what is the status of the matching grant in the city? Can you share a little bit more of the details around that?
Yeah. So when I first joined commerce, I really thought, how can I help life science companies because they just need millions and millions of dollars. And I spoke to a colleague, and we started talking about SBIR STTR matching, and that's when I learned we've been trying to get that at the state level. So I thought, hey, maybe the city can do it, but I wanted it to not be too complicated to access the funds. So basically, we were able to fund 21 companies with funds that have phase 1 and phase 2 SBIR or STTRs, and that money is to be used for technical assistance. I guess in my mind, those are the things you don't necessarily realize you have to pay for or want to pay for, like your lawyers or your marketing planner. So, and the status is that we will be re-upping that. The first program was a pilot program. We learned a lot of lessons um, through the Science Center, who's our implementation partner for the technical services. So we do plan to have another iteration of SBIR, STTR matching at the city level, and hopefully we can also get it at the state level at some point. I definitely think the state supports it at the highest level for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely there are a lot of states that provide matching programs, and I think Pennsylvania, there's a lot of appetite to join them. The challenge with getting any new legislation passed is you need money to pay for it,
Mhm.
and it can be challenging to find new sources of revenue because it means you either have to like increase taxes or find a new tax base or you increase the deficit, which, legislators don't like any of those options, which is fair. It
Yeah.
impacts their residents. And so trying to find, you know, creative ways like Rebecca has done is really amazing. But there's been a lot of focus on the life science industry in Pennsylvania, a lot of excitement around recent wins. So not quite sure what this 2026-2027 budget year is going to hold, but we are hopeful that um, maybe some new things come across the line to be able to put up new programs like an SBIR STTR match.
Yeah, I imagine it's always hard to find money. And that kind of brings us to, kind of the story that we talk about all the time about Philadelphia, in that we have world class science here. We have amazing universities that have incredible, science that they're spinning out companies from. But there's all this tension around, it keeps coming up in every single conversation that I have around funding, is like, what does Philadelphia need more of? And it's that VC infrastructure. So, how are you thinking about that gap, and what's being done to close it?
I think the good news is that there's a lot more attention around funding for life science companies here in Philly. We're seeing more regional funds. We're seeing university-backed investment vehicles, startup studios, and stronger coordination around VC groups, through PAC, for example. So I think it's good to start out with the good news, and also just the fact that we did this first. That it was approved for us to do this first SBIR CTR matching. Those are also non-dilutive funds that companies could use. So I just think, investors are paying more attention. We're in the top 10 for growth for VC investment uh, this year. And this is measured like around the world. So there's, top 10 cities. There's cities within and also outside of our country. And when I looked at that top 10, we are number 2 for the amount of growth. So like New York City, tons of money, right? But were like at 30 something percent, maybe 37 some odd percent. And we're in like 62, 63%. There was only one city that outgrew us, and that was only by 1 or 2%. So there's good news around this.
Yeah, there's definitely good news, encouraging news. I think Philadelphia, Pennsylvania had a bit of a marketing problem where we'd invite investors, big companies, small companies to Pennsylvania, and they are pleasantly surprised what they find here. But I think we're all tired of people being surprised,
Yeah.
and we just want them to know upfront the value of all the life sciences industry in the Commonwealth. It's interesting to hear about uh, people talking about bringing more VC locally. And well, at the end of the day, I think about, okay, well, what do you want the impact to be? Is the impact you want to like walk by a bunch of VC offices, or is the impact that you want more VC funding coming to Pennsylvania companies? And I think it's the latter. And in post-COVID era, I just don't know how these, like, how much these nimble VC teams are really gonna be trying to open up offices everywhere there's a good ecosystem. A lot of them, even if they're based in Boston or based in New York or based in San Francisco, they're flying all over the world trying to see, all of this technology. So if we, as we have momentum, there's more visibility into Pennsylvania, and I think as long as we keep the eyes here and make sure that, we are welcoming when VCs come and visit and we show them around, and educate them on what's here if they don't know. That is really valuable, and I think that can have just as much of an impact. We have a funds of funds at DCD where we can, invest in a VC raise, and then attached to that is, a certain amount of those funds have to be invested in Pennsylvania companies. And I think traditionally, like biotech, life sciences was sought as that's very high risk. But now with the focus on the industry, we are, more interested and more open to venture capital that is focused on that industry, which is exciting, I think.
Mm. I will say in our office, we do have a retention team. And for example, we're working with a company right now, um, which is it's so unusual to me because money travels everywhere, right? Even into space. And so, um, but the investors want this person. We're right here in Philadelphia, just a quick train ride from New York, but they want this company to move to New York. The founder and the folks working there don't want to move out of Philadelphia. So there's that piece of our work too, where we work to keep companies here. But I'm always dumbfounded when an investor wants a company close by and the company is like happy where they are. So
Mhm.
we deal with that as well.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point that the VCs actually want their companies close to them. So, around what you said, I think everybody's talking about it in a way that like money travels, like, right?
Yeah.
You can wire money, you can, it'll travel. I think it sounds like though people want more opportunities to be able to run into people in the ecosystem here locally because this is where they're doing their day-to-day business, their day-to-day operations. It's easier to build trust in person live like this, and easier for you to continue those conversations when you're co-localized. So maybe there are some VCs that would benefit from setting up a little ecosystem here in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
and even like a few that I've heard that are like on the outskirts of Philadelphia. When they come into the city, they're like really impressed by what they see. To your point, and it's like even those people we want to pull in a little more often into the city to really meet the companies and the founders and the really amazing science that's happening here. So yeah. So speaking of companies, because you were mentioning about wanting to co-localize with a VC, can you tell us about one of your proudest like success stories of like a company that started from the ground up here, reached out to you all for support and funding or help with securing funding, and what happened? Like, we'd love to hear some of your awesome success stories.
Yeah. So I think we have a lot locally. One success story, and this was before my time with commerce, I think, but Invisible Sentinels one, they spun their research out of Drexel University. So they focused on food safety and testing. Um, and what they had was like a really valuable IP and strong expertise, and what they needed was the ability to commercialize. Another one is Arrow Biotherapeutics. We're still here, and that company emerged out of our cell and gene therapy scene. Um, and what they needed was the difficult part every deep tech startup faces is translating promising research a company um, into a company of investors or pharmaceutical partners that a product that they'll actually back. Um, and so I don't. It's funny. I don't think the city necessarily writes like these big checks. It's what you get being a part of this hyper local ecosystem. Another one I would mention is Biomeme as well. They're a company that's started with like a practical idea, like how do we take sophisticated molecular testing out of the lab and make it portable enough to use in the field. So a lot of them benefited from state funding, from SBIR funding, local commercialization support that we have. I think the Science Center works really heavily with their capital readiness programs. We have this patient ecosystem as well. So I think it's like a conglomeration of a lot of things within the city that helps these companies. Not necessarily like just like one check. I mean, you have the workforce, you have universities and institutions, you have the patients, we have VC and funding that comes in, we have government funding. So it's the whole entire ecosystem, I think, and what makes these companies successful. But I think those are three examples of smaller companies that are doing quite well.
Yeah, and I'll just highlight a recent one. So Lattice Bio just closed a 97 million Series A raise, which is amazing. And they're a cell and gene therapy company, and I've seen the CEO on at least one panel now, and he talked about wanting to build here because it has the expertise needed to build a cell and gene therapy company, or really a gene therapy platform company that can go all the way. And what's great about this startup is they have really plugged themselves into the Philadelphia ecosystem and all of the resources that kind of together, as Rebecca talked about, make a difference. So they're located in one of the incubators in Philadelphia that's in a Keystone Innovation Zone. So they get a tax credit. And if they don't have tax liability, the great thing is they can sell it for cash non dilutive funding. They also are the recipient of funds from two of our local VCs that are state funded. And knowing about those resources is really important as you're building a company in a place like Philadelphia, so you know where to access it and how to tie it into your business plan.
Oh my gosh, awesome stories. Lots of really great, and these are the things I feel like we don't get to hear often enough. So thank you for sharing them. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to share, like, for us to be able to showcase it more. But maybe it's happening because one of the things that I kept on hearing, especially last year, and maybe you've heard over the years, is there was, maybe not so much now because we just had this investment happening. There was a little bit of an absence of big pharma in our localized area. We have some big names here like GSK, and Legend just moved in, and Jazz has always been here. But in terms of bigger companies, we're starting to see some really big investments being made. $1 million, J&J's sorry, not million, billion,
Billion.
J&J's $1 billion cell therapy facility, Eli Lilly's $3.5 billion investment in the Lehigh Valley, which is incredible. TerraPower's $450 million radioisotope facility in Greater Philadelphia. So we've obviously had these success stories. What is it that they're finally starting to see? Like, the marketing is working. So tell us what's happening. What is the story that you're telling, and what are they starting to finally notice about us?
Oh, I was gonna say, I this is the great timing for your question because I feel like we had a similar conversation like a week or 2 ago of like, what is Pennsylvania doing right? Like, what's changed? We have great momentum. We've seen great change. So I'll just speak from the Commonwealth, Pennsylvania level. When Governor Josh Shapiro took office, he really wanted to focus on the economy. And so he did a couple things, but one of the first was setting up the Office for Transformation and Opportunity. So that is supposed to be a nimble office in the government that can reach across all the different departments and make sure that large economic development projects get done. There's a lot of times when states are competing for a really large project from, say, pharma. They are putting forth incentives, but after the deal is done, a lot of them will walk away. But there's so much that goes on between putting a shovel in the ground and actually running your product. And every day, every week, every month that you're behind schedule, maybe because of a permitting problem, it's a really big problem for a company. And so Pennsylvania has, committed to being a partner on those projects, making sure they are seen through. Like, if you choose to come to Pennsylvania, we are going to make sure that you get all the permits you need and that that project gets completed in a timely manner. And that's really important to large businesses. The other thing I will say is the GCD published its first economic development plan in 20 years, and that really focused us to say we are gonna have 5 industries that we are focused on, and we're gonna, put a lot of our resources toward it so we can make the most impact there because, when you're spreading across, your attention or your funding or your support, it can be really hard to make a difference. And so life sciences being one of them, I think really helped change the conversation and bring more attention that Pennsylvania is very serious about competing for these big projects.
And I'll say on the city level, it was similar. As soon as Mayor Sherelle Parker took office, she signed it, an executive order just making it known that Philly is open for business. We have within commerce, the mayor's business action team sits within commerce, and again, like permitting, licensing, all these things, we're trying to make it move at the speed of business. Um, there's certain companies that are just, like large capital project and just large edifices, everything like TerraPower Isotopes, for example. And we've developed a program called PHL Prime. I don't remember what those stand for, but some of these companies are like just need high touch because it involves like Pico and PGW and SEPTA. And so we have sort of a faster track and somebody working across departments to help with these companies that need more touch points. And also with all this interconnectedness, there's government interconnectedness as well. I think the state, the city have shown that they're invested in life sciences and healthcare because they've hired people like Michelle and people like myself. My position didn't exist, a few years ago, and probably Michelle's didn't either.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important that we're all on the same accord. And there's one company that we were able to attract here. We were able to pull their headquarters from another state. It was the perfect example of an attraction, retention, and expansion product. I mean, client, they were headquartered elsewhere. We brought them to Philly. They expanded their operation here. And it was retention too because they had a property here. So, but the state and the city worked together to make that happen.
That's awesome. Awesome stories, and, it's great to know that that exists. Like, I think that's maybe something we don't talk about enough is, like, that there is actually, like, thought and strategy behind what's happening in the state and the city. And there's people that have been put in place to really make those things happen, which is so refreshing to hear. And I think it's obviously working
Mhm.
because like we've gotten 3 major investments in the last, I don't know, couple of year and 2 years or
Well, those
couple of
those 3 were like the last one.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, so exactly.
Although there was a lot that went into it,
Prior to
Before
that.
prior.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
like
Oh,
like
yeah.
Years
TerraPower started, maybe in January of 25, but you're just hearing about it. So that's our work behind the scenes.
Yep. Yep. I know
Yeah,
because I know how long those things can take,
a
but,
long
like
time.
but the thing is, you like, it got done,
Yes.
right? So even though it took long, it was probably faster than anybody else could have delivered
Right.
it.
Because we're speaking to one another.
Exactly,
Mhm.
yes. Awesome. So I wanna shift gears a little bit because, there's people are always talking about conferences and, bringing conferences here because for the point we were talking about earlier is like, how do we bring more VC here? How do we get people into the city to really experience the city, see the city? So Philadelphia has really been, um, making a splash in terms of the conferences that they've been able to attract here, and Bio is one of them. I know that Bio's this year is in San Diego. So curious what the plans are for what's happening there in terms of like messaging from a Philadelphia perspective,
Yeah.
especially because Bio's coming here next year. And so love to hear like what's in the works for this year at Bio, and then maybe we can dip into like what's going to happen next year and what people can expect for Philadelphia Bio of 2027.
I think for the city, our message is not that we're just a city where great science happens. We're also a city where you can, where biotech companies or any type of company can come and actually be built in scale. We, you can go from ideation to commercialization here. And I think that our commercialization capability is what is under, I guess, advertised for
Mhm.
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm really excited about that. I'm excited we're getting that kind of attention now, but I think we have to keep, getting that message across because, some of these companies Michelle and I just talked about are like, manufacturing companies. So that means you can move to that scale and you can, develop your product. So I think that's for 2026. And I'll talk about 2027 afterwards. But yeah, I'll definitely be at Bio along with another colleague talking about Philadelphia.
Yeah, bio is always a great event. Usually meet so many new people. So I think for Pennsylvania, so a lot of the work that has been going on behind the scenes is trying to determine, okay, well, what programs are actually utilized by life sciences companies that like DCD offers, and how do we like showcase that Pennsylvania doesn't have a single life sciences fund, but we've actually invested quite a bit over all of these different programs. So really hoping to showcase like how active Pennsylvania has been, not just in winning big pharma deals, but for our entrepreneurs, our startups and small to mid-sized companies, what you know they may be able to benefit from if they come to Pennsylvania or set up a site in Pennsylvania. It's also, I think, important to make relationships early. So, I'll be looking for really early startups because, yeah, they may not be in a financial situation to move right away. But, as soon as they're able to expand, I want them to think of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, anywhere in the Commonwealth because they had a really great conversation or because they like went by the pavilion and, saw all the amazing, resources and things that are going on.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to say too that we're not trying to be Boston or San Francisco, but we're leaning into what makes Philadelphia distinct. And that is that hyper locality, right? Like that dense population of institutions and how they collaborate, our translational science, our hospital driven innovation, manufacturing proximity. It's really unusual. And I try to get people to understand not only is it unusual, but you can literally walk between these spaces. Some of them you have to drive, but you're not driving very far, just a few miles, literally. So it's really exciting. And also, I think it's great because, you have the state and several cities there within the PA pavilion because, if sometimes we get attractions where they're not sure if they want to be in an urban core or in the suburbs. And that's what's so lovely about having like the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, people like Michelle, because I can say, hey, talk to us. This is what we have to offer. But also talk to Michelle or the chamber and see what is offered, what's available outside the city as well.
So tell us a little bit more about what the city has planned for Bio 2027. I imagine activity has already begun in terms of flurry of like how we're going to show up, what we want people to know about Philadelphia. So give us a little peek behind the curtain, if you will, of what's planned for Bio 2027 here.
So we had a meeting recently with a bunch of stakeholders in Philadelphia who are really excited for bio to be coming. It's such a great opportunity for the region. And so we were also kind of getting informed a little bit on, what are the decisions being made by the bio committees. And, we really want to partner with them. We don't want to like duplicate too much. There's going to be a million events every single night. This is always how bio is. But the more that like stakeholders can be aligned so that we are getting good crowds and good engagement at everything that we are putting thought into. um, and I think what I personally am working on since I'm covering the whole Commonwealth is, yes, like Philadelphia is going to be highlighted because like bio is here and there's going to be so much to show off, but how do we also strengthen the connection since bio will be in Philadelphia with Pittsburgh, with Lehigh Valley, even all the way out to Erie, and really bringing in the rest of the state so that it really benefits, the larger industry in Pennsylvania to connect and also giving them the opportunity to showcase their part of Pennsylvania. So it's going to require a lot of coordination, but the great thing is we're starting early, we're really motivated, and we're working together.
Yeah, and I think a few things have to be in place for people to really visually understand or see what's happening here in Philly and Pennsylvania. I think our visible scale in life sciences infrastructure has to be seen, and I guess we'll probably have some tours and things like that to just show how interconnected we are. There has to be a clear company pipeline story for us to talk about Philadelphia and scaling. The capital presence on the ground has to be felt. So hopefully, I'm sure some of our local VC partners, as you know, of course, as well as the many cities and the state will be there. Um, I think we're really known for our talent, right? So the talent visibility needs to be there, and we should be able to demonstrate that with our institutions and mostly the connectivity. I think when you come to our pavilion, you can see how we all know one another. We're all connected and we're very accessible. And we just have to have a narrative that shows how cohesive we are and how collaborative we are as well. So I think that's that opportunity that we have as a city for Bio 2027.
Yeah, I'm really pumped. I'm excited for what you've got in store and just having all the people in the city. And I think it's just going to be buzzing and amazing. So super pumped for that next year. Um, so just to kind of close out our kind of conversation, because I always ask this question of my guests in terms of we just had like a love fest about Philadelphia and Pennsylvania because we love it here and we want it to thrive. We want our companies to thrive. We want people to know about the amazing talent that we have here. I think that's something that also is under um, talked about or estimated about our region is that the amount of talent that comes out of our universities. Locally and people that come back to the region because they love it so much here. There's a reason people come back. I love that you brought that up, and I think it's really important. But what are the things like? Be honest. Like, what do you think we actually need more of or differently? Like, what is the gap that we need to, or gaps that we really need to focus on fixing here?
I mean, the easy one is funding, right? Like, so more venture capital, more creative ways to help fund our startups. It's just that early stage piece and bridging them over to, a program like Capital Readiness. There is like a bridge that you need between when you start your company and even being ready to do that program. So just that early funding for companies is something we really want to see more of. And personally, I would like to see pharma have more presence in the city. Like 80% of global pharma is in our metro region. So it was really great to see Eli Lilly come here and open Gateway Labs. But I would love to see even more collaboration with the institutions, which also can maybe cut down on some of those repeat studies that they do when they acquire intellectual property. So,
Oh.
Yeah, I think just bouncing off of that to add to it, I think cohesion is something that we're still I mean, we're trying to find it. People are working really hard to bring together stakeholders, have tough conversations, connect the dots. It's a very, wonderful ecosystem to be part of. People, want to get to know you. They like really love to make an introduction and just working a little bit more so that we like have the narrative for bio in 2027 will be important. We don't have all the answers right now. It's something that we are still, working hard towards, but really excited to see all of the passionate, exceptionally smart people who are all working towards the same goal because we know we have something really special in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. And we just want to make sure that everyone else can see it.
Amazing, amazing. We can never ask for more money, so enough money. I
yeah,
should say
that's
we can
right.
never ask for
Not
enough
just
money.
science.
So
Yeah. I mean, life is priceless, right? So when we're curing and treating disease.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to ask this one last question. So to the person who is listening to this episode, if they are a founder or a scientist or someone who is thinking about spinning out a company and the investor who hasn't looked hard at this market, like if there's an investor watching this and really didn't know all about Philadelphia in this way, what do you want them to do differently after hearing this episode or watching this episode?
I'll start small because Michelle is broad, but I want founders to rethink what's possible in Philadelphia. I want them to realize there are real resources here, SBIR funding, university partnerships, incubators, commercialization support, collaborative network. Um, and honestly, it's why I always try to get people that are thinking about Philly to come to Philly because I've not had one project where they didn't step inside the city if they hadn't been here before and they're like, I had no idea. The perception is completely different from the reality. I think, the bigger message is that Philadelphia is no longer just a research city. It is a company building city. And the state, it's the same message, I believe.
When you're just starting out, there's a lot of unknowns, especially if you're a first time founder. So I would say, if you're interested in entrepreneurship or you have an idea, just, rather than going onto Google and looking up what are the 10 best ways to be an entrepreneur, things I should be doing every day, um, like search for resources that are local. This is in Philadelphia or other parts of Pennsylvania. Determine, like, is there a meeting I can go to? Is there an accelerator or is there a workshop that I can be a part of? Because, being an entrepreneur can be a lonely business. And the earlier you build your network, the better off you'll be because, those connections will come in handy. Like maybe you're going to bring someone onto your team or they're going to be on your board or they're going to advise you. Um, and so just sort of like exercising that interest and that creativity from the beginning. You can start really small. Sometimes getting started is the hardest part. Like, when you have a blank piece of paper and you have to write an essay, like,
Right.
what am I going to do? Um, so just not putting too much pressure on yourself and exploring what is out there, I think is important.
And we're super friendly, so we make it
Yeah.
easy. I think
Yes,
that's the
and you're
beautiful thing.
always welcome to
Yes,
come to Rebecca or I. We're
that's
always
right.
happy to have a conversation, help you, point you in a direction if that's what you need. But yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your time, your expertise, for sharing all of the resources, what's available here, just about Pennsylvania as a whole, Pittsburgh included. Shout out to Pittsburgh and the rural regions. But there is so much goodness happening here, and I loved actually what you said, Rebecca, about the shift. We are not only a research building city anymore, or state, really. We are a company building one. And I
Yeah,
actually wanted to add, I forgot to mention, I saw Penn State actually brought in some people to help with some spin
yeah.
out, companies from their research that they have going on. So lots of momentum going into this year and next, and we're really excited to see it happening.
And
So
if I can steal something from Josh Shapiro, we have our own research triangle, right? From Penn and Drexel and Temple to Penn State
Mhm.
to University of Pittsburgh. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. It's just lot bigger than the one down in North Carolina.
that's right.
There's a few more miles in between those,
That's right.
but it's still all here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. Really appreciated your time, and I look forward to Bio 2027 and what's to come.
Thank you,
Thank
Joanna.
you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah.